engaging more with your audience and listening to what they want can actually allow you to either change your purpose a little bit more, or at least define that, but actually then change the story you're telling them.
This is Velocitize Talks, and I'm Eric Jones. I'm here with Vicky Lalwani, the General Manager at Adrenalin. Vicky, it's good to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about Adrenalin and what are the qualities that make you such an award-winning agency?
Because Adrenalin's an agency, we're about 15 years old now. It primarily started as a web design and development sort of an agency, but the agency sort of evolved itself and we started focusing a lot more on, more complex builds. Things like e-commerce, content management systems became a huge thing. And over the last 24, 36 months, we've expanded ourselves into more app development, so mobile tablet. And we sort of see ourselves as more of an agency that understands what end consumers want, what our marketing or our customers' marketing objectives are, and how we can use technology to basically bridge that gap. So I guess the reason why we're really award-winning is that we push our creative very strong, but at the same time we have some amazing people who are able to really leverage some smart thinking about how systems can get connected and actually make it really seamless for customers to engage with brands.
So, diving down on your people, how has culture played a major part in your success as an agency?
So we've taken the sort of attitude that it's not about people's skills, but it's about their willingness to learn and to willingness to challenge themselves. And by creating this culture of constantly creating excellence, we've found that our team tried to constantly push the status quo. And we've actually really enjoyed working with clients who are willing to sort of take a little bit more risk than taking your traditional approach to doing things. And we feel that sort of culture of constantly challenging and doing one better than the previous project has really helped propel some of the work that we have for our clients as well.
Is there anything that you're doing differently in terms of, on the upfront, in terms of selecting potential employees to ensure that they will, in fact, fit in well with your existing culture?
So I guess our interview process might be slightly different to some of the others. And so we typically do, for example, phone interviews where it's more of getting them to ask as much questions about the role, more so than asking them about their experience, because they're looking to leave. So what's their next goal? Where do they want to sort of thrive their best? From there, if there's a good fit in terms of what their expectations are and what we offer, we then take it into more of a formal interview process where you probably then assess your technical skills. We then do behavioral profile tests, and we actually do that for almost everyone that we hire into the business. And that's not a deal breaker, but it at least allows us to understand how do they want their ideal manager to support them and to grow them. And the last thing that we do is a chemistry test. And this is where they actually get to meet some of the other team members that they'd be working with and actually ask them questions about the role. What do they love and not love about it? We don't see interview as a one-way thing, it's a two-way stream. By changing this process and changing some of the onboarding as well, our average tenure in the agency, in our industry, or in our company, it's probably about 3.5 years. We've actually had 3 developers who've just finished 10 years of the business. And the average tenure in Sydney digital agency, I think, is somewhere between 1.8 to 2.1 years. So to be able to track nearly double in that aspect is something that we're actually quite proud of in terms of what we're doing.
That's a big success. Is there anything that you're doing similarly on the client side to ensure that your clients are, the type of clients that are in fact willing to take, risk and to experiment?
Yes. So I think one of the things that we probably were really, really poor at doing, maybe about, say, 7-8 years ago, is we were great at solving problems like coming out with this amazing technology platform. We'd hand it over to them. Here's a training manual. Good luck. And we realized that wasn't really going to work in terms of the ongoing maintainability and improvements, and sort of taking some of the analysis of how it's performing and constantly looking at ways to improve and evolutionize the product. So we now sort of work with clients where it's not just a fixed budget for their first project, but there's actually a commitment for them to want to see improvements through it.
Mm-hmm. One of the other things I observed, by studying Adrenalin is, you have a stated goal of achieving 50-50 gender parity in the business. How does that, do you think, help you deliver better client, service?
Across the agencies and across creative, there was obviously a huge sort of conversation to be had around why there's not such a gender-neutral workspace. And I guess we'd never sort of consciously done that. And so we really weren't sure what some of the challenges were internally. And we sort of did a bit of a deep dive whether were we intentionally choosing one gender over the other for specific roles? And I guess as we sort of set this goal to say, look, irrespective of what the gender percentages are, the intention was to always find really good people with great talent, irrespective of the gender background.
Switching gears a little bit to talk about, digital marketing in general. Given that consumers today are increasingly, overconnected, inundated, overstimulated, how do you think digital marketing, needs to evolve to cut through all of that?
I think it's quite important to understand who your audience is and who you're trying to connect with, and also then to understand the platforms that they best use throughout. So, an example is we have a client who's, say, in the car racing event space. They have different events that they have throughout the year, and when they start them from, say, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they've got different audiences who during work hours might engage with them very differently, and they have specific platforms that they'd go to or use their website more. But then when they're watching the race on TV, they might use their tablets a lot more as well. So we're finding ways that if you can get really smart about when your consumers are online and engaging with you, and you're able to tap and sort of connect with them more on those specific platforms or channels, we're finding that actually works a lot better for our customers as well, as opposed to just scattergun approach.
You have a group within Adrenalin X. Which is devoted to testing and experimentation. Tell us a little bit about that organization and what it's doing for your clients.
So one of the challenges we probably realized about 3 years ago was that in order for the agency to grow, that we were almost dependent on our clients to come to us and say, hey, here's a brief, here's something we want to build, and we would then respond and help them out with executing that project. And we realized that effectively our growth was held ransom by their briefs. So we sort of say, why don't we just sort of, put the conversation the other way around and say, tell us what your business challenges are. And effectively we were looking at not just using websites or apps to solve those problems, but we started playing with technologies that were sort of a bit more niche or disruptive. And we're able to actually get clients on site or even take the technology there and show how they could engage with their customers a bit differently as well. So that's kind of what the model is for. And so what it offers our clients is just a way to experience new technology at no risk.
That's great. I'm sort of wondering, have any of those experiments, paid off in a big way, led to a major campaign or things like that?
Yeah, so a good example is we started experimenting with iBeacons. And we had a client who was a car manufacturer. They came up to us and said, look, a big challenge that we have is we get customers that come into the dealership. They deal with salespeople. There's a little bit of friction. They find a car they like, and then they sit down with the business manager to work out the finance. And then they realize how expensive it is to pay for that car, and they leave really annoyed. So what we'd created is, it was an app, but it used iBeacon as a primary technology. So the way it worked is you walked into the dealership, they give you an iPad. The first thing you do is you type in your email, and you get a full floor plan of all the vehicles that are on different levels of this car dealership. Using that iPad, you could then go, well, I'm looking for an SUV, it needs to have 7 seats, this is how much my budget is. And it starts to dim out the cars that are not relevant to you and shows you the ones that are. As you walk to a car that has an iBeacon there, it can ping back onto your iPad and it knows that you're standing next to it and it brings up all the information about the car. And you can do this as you go around, and when you're ready, you can speak to a dealership or to a salesman and organize your test drive. But because you've already educated yourself about the car, you know what it's going to cost to drive away. When you sit down with the business manager, it's a frictionless conversation.
I'm sort of curious on the technology front, sort of sticking with that. What technology are you most excited about that's sort of coming down the pike and because of its potential that it can bring to some of your clients?
I guess probably the one that I'm most excited about in the long run is probably how digital and physical spaces connect. And so things like using iBeacon or using your smartphones where you can use geo-based location information to be able to connect with outdoor advertising or even with retail space. I think for me that's a lot more exciting because it allows people to be able to connect with brands when they just don't expect it. But I am also really excited about the AI space as well. And I guess the reason why I am is because speaking to a lot of people, there's been a lot of concerns that they've got that AI is going to replace our jobs. And in a few years' time, we're going to be made redundant, and these robots are going to be all over the place doing things. And I guess my view is very much different. I look at AI as a way to actually give people more time back. and actually allow us to put our intelligence into other more meaningful things.
So, going back to your point about personalization in the physical world, do you think in some ways that's actually a safer place for personalization to play than online personalization, where, if you get retargeted too often, it starts to be either creepy or annoying?
Yeah, I completely agree. I agree with that view, that I think that there's even this issue with online retargeting, where I feel that brands sometimes don't know when to stop the retargeting anymore. A case in example, I ordered from an online grocery store, and despite having completed my order, I still get retargeted the next day going, order more than that and you'll get free delivery. And I'm like, I just paid for delivery, so you retargeted me something that I'm now annoyed about. Whereas I think if you're in a physical space and you're actually being asked or almost being advertised something or asked to connect with a brand, I find those sort of moments very few and far between, that I might actually engage with that.
With the expansion of all these different tools, you talked a little bit about AI, VR, AR, voice. Mm-hmm. How does the choice of channel begin to affect the message?
I think voice is a huge leap, and what Google Duplex is doing with the way customers can use an automated system to make engagements with brands without actually connecting with the brand sort of physically or actively. I think voice has got a huge potential to be able to solve a lot of those problems. But I think what Facebook is doing with your likes of investing in Oculus, I think they're definitely seeing a long-term potential in terms of how people could engage from a more social perspective with their friends and family. And I think that sort of mixed reality is something that I'd probably be more excited about than maybe on a per campaign level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You talked about generations. Yeah. Do you think about, are there any generalities that you would say in terms of how you might market to Gen Z mm-hmm.
Differently
than prior generations?
We're currently working with a client, it's a government client, and their audiences are primarily parents and kids. And so when we've been working with these kids to help sort of almost define a brand or to define some of the elements and creative that goes on the website, they actually helped us design the logo for the site, and they were choosing the color palettes they wanted to use and the fonts they wanted to use. And we started thinking, wow, that's not how we would build it. But when you work with a generation like that and you see how they actually engage with these platforms, it's far different than myself, for example.
Mm-hmm. We, there are any number of articles suggesting that Gen Z actually cares less and less about brands. Mm-hmm. And yet you just mentioned this co-creation of a brand by that generation. Yeah. Is that a path forward for brands, or how do brands stay relevant with that new generation?
Listening to your audience is a very key thing, and I think what this government agency was doing was actually realizing that if they created anything boring, that it wouldn't work. And I think it's very admirable that they actually said, let's engage with them and let them tell us what to do. And I don't think a lot of bigger brands do that. I think they're already mature to the point that they feel safe. Engaging more with your audience and listening to what they want can actually allow you to either change your purpose a little bit more, or at least define that, but actually then change the story you're telling them. And by sort of working towards achieving that brand purpose, you actually have a really good story to tell your customers, and you have a better way of engaging with your customers.
Mm-hmm. You've mentioned you love numbers. If you weren't doing what you're doing today, you'd be a financial planner. Yep. Numbers, data, privacy, regulation have all been in the news recently. Do you think some of these concerns and these regulations threaten, our ability to personalize marketing experiences, or do you think, we're so far down the path that it doesn't matter anymore? People realize the convenience that, giving up this personal information actually offers.
Yeah, I think what this recent events have done is actually highlighted to people about what they're giving away. So I do think that they will be a lot more, aware of that, and probably reduce how much information they share. And I think it's up to brands to be able to build comfort in individuals to say, well, this is the only things we're going to do with it.
Mm-hmm. Since you do have Adrenalin X, what emerging technology are you most excited about in terms of its potential for clients?
Some of our clients are in the retail space, or they own retail property. And so we've been looking at working with them around using things like iBeacons or those big digital screens to be able to connect that physical and digital world. I guess seeing iBeacons used a lot more than they have been and what they've been talked about, and I think there's potential there for that to be quite huge as well in terms of whether brands know how to use it properly or not.
Vicky, is there a book that you'd like to recommend to our viewers?
I'm a huge fan of Freakonomics, and I think it was the Super Freakonomics, the one after that. That was something, again, because I love numbers. I liked how the two authors had basically taken stats and kind of shown you a different side or reframed it through a different lens. So that for me was one that I actually chuckled on almost in every chapter that they suggested. And yeah, it's one that I absolutely love. I think that was really good.
It's awesome. Thank you, Vicky.
No, thank you for your time. Cheers.
That was Vicky Lalwani, General Manager at Adrenalin.